Welcome to the Niche Pursuits Podcast. Are you ready to discover some niche business ideas that actually work? Well, it's time for a motivational kick to jumpstart your next big idea. Here's your host, Spencer Haas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Niche Pursuits Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Haas from nichepursuits.com. And today I've got an interview with Chandler Bolt from Self-Publishing School. That's self-publishingschool.com. Now, I met Chandler at a conference about 2 years ago and was immediately impressed with his business and overall attitude. And as you'll hear on this episode, Chandler is in general a very positive and friendly person. And although Chandler is still quite young in his 20s, he's already much more business savvy than I was in my 20s, or maybe even now. In addition to hearing his story about how he made self-publishing school a success, you'll also hear about how he recommends writing a book and promoting it. We also dive into some of his productivity hacks and routines that have made him be able to accomplish so much so quickly. So with that, here's the interview with Chandler Bolt. So, and I know this is kind of an odd place to start, but from what I've seen of you, Chandler, you're quite the go-getter, and I mean that in a very good way. You're great at networking, you're active on social media, you're putting in the hard work and time, and your business has grown a ton as a result. So what does a typical day look like for you?
Yeah, typical day for me. It is wake up at 6, pretty much, not even pretty much every morning, except for the weekend. So 6 a.m., I do my morning routine. I practice the Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. He's a good friend of mine, and that book completely changed my life when I read it in 2014. So my morning routine, I'll try to just skim through it, but it involves like I read, I do a little mini workout, I'm doing meditation, I'm doing affirmations. I'm, making a quick little breakfast and just, different things like that kind of like, just really get me going. That's a keystone habit for me. You know, the Charles Duhigg Power Habit book. Yeah. He talks about keystone habit. That's a keystone habit. If I hit that morning routine, it's autopilot, you know, like, and working from home, you can probably relate to this, Spencer, but like, I have a habit of like putting on my work clothes. Because I found that when I first started working from home, that was the biggest struggle is the blend between work and home, or work and just like enjoying yourself. Right. So it's like I put on my work clothes and I take off my work clothes, right? So it's just like a mental trigger, like, hey, it's time to go to work. That's obviously because I don't have the mental stimuli of like, hey, I'm going into the office. So my brain automatically switches. So I have my morning routine. I start work at 8. My team's kind of all around the country and around the world. So we do a daily huddle. It's every morning at 8 a.m. So it's 15 minutes. So that's just kind of checking in with the team, solving issues, reporting numbers, detailing number one priority for the day, that sort of thing. And then it's, you know, I go to lunch. I'm a pretty hardcore on my naps. So I do a 17-minute nap right after lunch usually. Okay. And for me, I found that gives me like, I have 2 days in one. It's like I have my first day, which is in the morning, 6 a.m. all the way through noon or so when I eat lunch. And then I have my second day, which is the afternoon. And my mind is just so much more clear. So I do that, and then I'm working till, I don't know, 6, 7, something like that. And then, you know, either grab dinner or whatever, and then, you know, do some stuff at night. It's, I'm kind of all on or all off. So my weeks are pretty intense. And then, you know, one final thing that I do is every night, this is like another keystone habit. I gotta do it, every night, I take 10 minutes, sometimes 15, to just literally plan out my day for the next day. Just kind of like an hour by hour, like, hey, here's what I'm going to be doing. And this is generated off of, and I'm going like way more into an answer than you probably wanted.
No, this is great. This is good.
But like, this is basically, I say, hey, what's my top priority tomorrow? And what's my day look like? This is generated off of, every Sunday night, I sit down and say, hey, what's my top 3 to 5, projects or tasks or like priorities, whatever you want to call it, for the week. And I rank those in order of priority. And that is built off of every month. So like, we're rolling into a new month right now as we record this episode. Like just yesterday, I spent putting out my goals for the month. Now I've got 4 goals for the month, and those 2 are organized in order of priority. And I found that makes a huge difference, not just listing your goals, because I know I have accountability buddy or accountability partner that we get on a call every single month, and we say, hey, how'd you do on your goals last month? It's either a green or a red. And then how are you doing? Like, what are your goals for this coming month? And then we just share lessons learned, things like that. So by doing that, I know that, hey, if I hit my 2, 3, and 4, but missed my number 1, that month was actually a failure because I got distracted off of what was most important to do the other stuff. So that's kind of how I integrate it kind of across like, okay, like the monthly goals, which Sunday night, the weekly goals, which every night, is the daily goals for tomorrow. And then that kind of sets me up for a successful day, which kind of looks similar to just what we just talked about.
Yeah, I love it. So many good things that you mentioned there. I mean, first of all, I'm a fan of naps, so I'm not going to knock you for that. I love it. And then the other huge thing for me is the prioritization of tasks and goals. I do it a slightly different, but similar concept, right? So I'm definitely sitting down on a daily basis. And I find that huge. I mean, even if it's only 5 or 10 minutes, listing out what's your, top goal for the day or top priority for the day and then week, it really does help you focus so you can accomplish a lot more. And then just the other interesting thing that we were chatting about before the podcast is just, your schedule, you're up early, working by 8, doing your huddle and working, into the evening is a little bit different than mine. I mean, you're a young guy in your 20s. And I'm a little bit older than that, late 30s and 4 kids and married. So at 8 a.m, I'm making lunches for my kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or taking them to school, which is great. Like I love having the ability and the freedom to do that because I know a lot of people, they can't, right? They have to be into work at 7 or 8 in the morning. And so, but, at 3:30 in the afternoon, my kids are coming home. So that's like a natural break in my day where sometimes I can't work for a little while, just getting the kids home and that sort of thing. So I just make note of it that it's interesting that you can work different amounts in a week and still accomplish a lot, right? You just
100%.
might have to adjust your goals based on what you're able to put in.
100%. And I mean, a lot of people would argue that having kids and the time constraints and the things that you have make you way more productive because I know that I can just keep working, right? You know that you're not going to be able to. Therefore, Parkinson's law kicks in. Parkinson's law is like an object will swell in proportion to the amount of time, space, or whatever that you give yourself to complete it. It's like, so for the same reason that Americans statistically spend 3% more than they earn, is also the same reason that when you had a test in high school or in college, like you crammed the night before, and is also the same reason that like if you don't have boundaries on when you work, it'll just continue to fill all the time that you give it, right? That's all Parkinson's law, which, you could probably argue that some of my time is spent inefficiently, even as much as I am just an efficiency hawk and just like really on that sort of thing. But there's no denying. Like I remember doing this challenge where I put together this entrepreneur house in San Diego when I lived there, and we were all guys running online businesses, and it's like this mastermind house, and it was like really high growth environment. So we do these challenges, and 1 month we did the challenge was no work after 6 p.m. and that was hard,
and that was a difficult thing.
but the interesting thing that I noticed, which this is kind of like bringing this full circle to what you were just talking about, Spencer, is I noticed that I was actually more productive. Especially in the afternoon, because I was like, oh gosh, like someone's about to come into the room and tell me to step away from the laptop because it just turned 6 p.m. Right?
Yeah.
And so I know that I need to actually get this done. Like I can't just stretch it till 7 or till, whenever, which is it's kind of a pretty powerful thing.
Yeah. And, so that's maybe the takeaway here for listeners is that whatever amount of time that you have, try to make it as productive and as effective as possible. Because I know a lot of people are working full time, and I was working full time and had sort of a side business for a number of years where I literally, after I came home from work and then put the kids to bed, so it'd be, 9 o'clock at night, like I had a couple hours and that was it. every day to focus on my business. And so I knew I had to be as productive as possible. So whether you have 1 hour, 2 hours, or 10 hours in a day, just, do your best to make it as effective as possible. So just a good thought for people listening out there. And so, I do want to dive into your story a little bit more here, Chandler, to give people your background. What was your work experience, education experience previous to starting self-publishing school?
Yeah, so education experience, I'm a college dropout. Dropped out of school because I got tired of learning how to run a business from professors who had never ran a business. That really didn't make too much sense to me. I'm a learn by doing, not a learn by theory kind of guy.
Yeah.
We've kind of integrated that into what we teach at self-publishing school. It's like we don't teach anything that we haven't done because that's just super important to me. I feel like it's hard to teach something that you haven't done, or it's easy to teach it, but it's hard to teach it accurately. And so that's my educational background. My parents, they're both pretty blue collar. They met in a factory working night shift, and then just kind of put their foot down and said, "Hey, I'm going to create a better life for me and my brother." And that's what they did. And so neither one of them, my dad flunked out of college after a semester. My mom never went. And so that's kind of like the background that I came from, which is just street smarts over book smarts. Like just be an intelligent, be good at solving problems, because that's what you have to do on an everyday basis in life. So you master that skill. And it doesn't really matter if you can recite which king was, whatever for some historical event. Like that doesn't matter so much as like the ability to figure things out. And then on the work side, I kind of, my dad's an entrepreneur. He runs a construction company. I'm from South Carolina, so we're kind of like from the middle of nowhere, redneckville. So my dad runs a construction company. My mom's a realtor. So I think growing up, on the work side of things, I saw the flexibility and freedom that they have, similar to probably how your kids see this, Spencer, is like they see the ability that you have to take them to school, to make their lunch, to come to their t-ball games or their sporting events or dance or, whatever that thing is. And that stuck with me. I think subconsciously, like obviously at that age, you're not thinking like, wow, my dad has such a great job compared to other people's jobs. But subconsciously, hey, my dad and mom can come to my things and my friends' parents can't because they're working, right? Or like we can take this vacation or, we can do these things. And so I think that kind of planted the seeds for me. And I started a business in high school. It was a landscape and lawn care and pressure washing business. I made my first little chunk of change to save for college. Then in college, I worked with an internship called Student Painters. So they teach you how to run a business by running an exterior house painting company. So you literally hire college students and paint houses. And so that was the first time hitting six figures. I broke the record for that year. I was number one in the country and number one for the entire company for all managers, and I hit six figures there. And it was little things like that, honestly, that gave me the confidence to drop out. And that's when I dropped out, and then I started and failed really hardcore. I was trying to get something off the ground, and then eventually stumbled into self-publishing school. And then this is where we've taken it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to jump into that. So, what made you decide to quit college? Was it because you were doing well with the painting business, or was it some other idea that you had and you just decided to do it? Did you have support from your parents?
They're all great questions. So basically, it really was the whole learning from people who haven't been there, but that was just the seed and the kernel. I knew that when I dropped out of school, I knew I was going to run a business. I just didn't know what business that would be. So I dropped out of school not knowing what business I would run. For me, it was ultimately like I'd always said to myself, hey, whenever my business reaches a certain point, I'm going to just drop out. Because I'm not here for the degree. I'm here for the education, right? I was a business and entrepreneurship major, so that's what I was there to learn. But then that became pretty disappointing. So ultimately, what happened is a friend came in, and he said, "Chandler, when are you going to drop out of school?" And we just came back from this conference, and I was like, oh gosh, that really made me think. And I started thinking and trying to come up with a solution. And I said to myself, oh, well, I'll just double down and finish faster. And when I thought about that, the idea of that, it made me want to throw up. it sounded so miserable. And all I could think of is every time my mom would call, she'd be like, Chandler, you're killing yourself. Like you need to, I was doing extracurricular stuff. I was a young life leader and I was running this business that was consuming basically all of my time. And then also a full-time college student. She was like, hey, why don't you just back off on some of this extracurricular stuff? And I would just tell her, Mom, I don't think you understand. That's what I live for. And that's the only reason I'm sane. And so I thought about the prospect of doubling down and finishing early. That sounded miserable. So then it just kind of sparked the thought for me of if it's not worth finishing early, then I need to question the merit of, is it actually worth finishing at all? And I pondered that question and I looked at the opportunity cost. And for me, I could have finished my degree for $7,000 in tuition plus living expenses, basically. And so for most people, they'd say, you're an idiot. Like if you don't do that, that's just idiotic. But for me, I looked at the opportunity cost and I said, hey, if I have 2 more years of my life devoted to this business, what could the potential upside be there? And I mean, the potential upside was that, the year that all my buddies were graduating, I hit 7 figures with my company. And so that opportunity cost, I just weighed it and dropped out. And ultimately, to answer your question, were my parents supportive? They questioned it a lot at first. And I actually think it was like kind of the right amount. Like, if your kids ever do something like this, Spencer, this might be a good solution.
All right.
They literally tried to poke every hole that they could in my plan. And they asked me a bunch of questions. And then as soon as they realized Chandler's thought this through, for me personally, like I'd talked to a bunch of mentors about it. I'd prayed about it. I thought about it a lot. Like I just really put a lot into this decision. And so once they figured out that I had and I had thought it through, they just flipped and they were like, cool, we are 100% supportive. So do whatever you need to do. We're going to back you 100%. And then I just remember that feeling of, wow, just knowing, especially when it got hard, because it got hard. I mean, I failed for a solid year and ultimately all of my bank accounts were negative. And just knowing in the back of your mind, like, hey, if this just continues to go poorly and I really put myself out there on a limb, like if that limb snaps, my parents are going to be there to catch me, like that was such a good feeling and it relieves so much stress and tension. And so that was kind of how they went through the process. And then they were 100% supportive moving forward.
Yeah. And that's huge to have your parents behind you like that on a big decision. And then obviously you made the right decision. I mean, we can see the results and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But to kind of get us to where you are today, I mean, at some point you decided to publish your first book.
Yep.
So why did you do that?
That's a great question. So I left out one small part of the story, which was that when I decided to drop out, I'd always wanted to study abroad. And so I'm thinking to myself, I knew I would do it. The classic piece was like, I think it was like, either spring of your junior year or fall of your senior year was kind of when people would do that. And so I was like, man, I'm going to miss out on that. And then it just dawned on me, I don't have to. and so I just said, hey, I'm going to study abroad and then drop out. It was kind of a cheap way to see Europe on the school's dime. And I treated that as a time of introspection where I said, okay, this is going to give me, 3 months to think about what I want to do with my life, or what business I want to start, that sort of thing. And then I'll come out of that with clarity and just be able to dive headfirst into what I'm doing. So as I was studying abroad, me and a buddy, I feel like one thing that I'm really good at is just productivity and making things efficient, especially like optimizing my own life. And a bunch of people are asking about that, especially after I hit 6 figures with self-publishing school. With student painters. While I was still, running that painting business in college, but I had a bunch of friends at this conference. They were wanting to start businesses and they were just asking me all these questions on how I did it and how I managed my workload and all that stuff. And so me and a buddy, we just said, hey, we should put together like a little PDF on just like, hey, productivity hacks and stuff, right? Things that we do. And then it's like we wrote it specifically for this small group of people, which turned out to be the best blessing that you could ever ask for, because when you have a clear avatar that you're writing your book for, I always teach, like, think of one person and then write the book to that person. Like literally say, Dear Spencer, and then write the chapter. And then just delete the Dear Spencer part. And if you are my complete avatar, like if you're ever struggling with voice, that's like the best hack, is just write specifically to one person. So that turned out to kind of be a blessing. And so we just did this PDF, and then it was like, hey, we could actually maybe make this a little bit bigger and then sell it on Amazon. So that's what we did. And we published the book on Amazon. It's called The Productive Person, the very first book that I did. And it was as I was studying abroad in Austria. And I remember one day I was snowboarding with my friends, which is what I really did in Austria for the most part. We were snowboarding, and they had heard about this book, and they said, Chandler, is the book doing well? I heard books don't make any money. And I said, well, you know what, guys, we were snowboarding all day yesterday and the book made $400. And it was as if kind of, as I said that, like as those words came out of my mouth, that I realized, hey, this is that passive income thing, that Robert Kiyosaki talked about in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that I read about in high school. And I thought can never happen. This is that thing. And it's one of those things where once you see it, you can't unsee it. Right. The book made close to $7,000 in the first month. And continue to make thousands of dollars a month in passive income, which led to me doing another book, led to me teaching another friend to do his book, which ultimately led to starting self-publishing school.
Perfect. Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, it's one of those things that you wrote this book probably not expecting it to do quite as well as it did. And I'm sure you did a lot to make sure it was successful. And we'll talk about some of those strategies, how people can make their books successful. But when you have that first home run, if you will, it's very motivating, and of course has led to self-publishing school. And so I want to dive into some of those numbers first, and then we're going to dive into strategies for publishing a successful book a little bit. Maybe you can share some tips. But first, back in about 2005, Business Insider did a big article on you and self-publishing school. And at the time, it said that you were on track to earn about $1 million that year. Are you willing to share how much your business will do this year?
Totally. Yeah. So 2015, Business Insider wrote that article. And the funny piece about that article is I remember this because my business was just starting to get off the ground. It was April of 2015. And I think we had done like 200, maybe 300,000. So we just launched in February. I think we'd done like 180 or something, if that. And I just remember I knew that the hook. So I got this intro to a chick that wrote for Business Insider, and I knew, I'm like, she's not going to write this story unless I give her a good hook. I'm a marketer, so I like writing hooks, right? And I was like, so the hook is college dropout, starts $1 million business, right? Like that's the hook. So I got to give her that hook. And so the hook was like, hey, I'm on track to hit $1 million this year, which like, if you know basic math, you know that April and $180,000 in revenue, that's definitely not on track to hit $1 million. But for me, I'm a huge fan of public accountability. So I knew that if this gets printed in Business Insider, like I'm going to hit $1 million. Like I'm going to do whatever I got to do to make that happen. Cause I don't want to look like an idiot. And I certainly don't want to be a liar, right? So I'm going to make sure that I hit this. And so what ended up happening is we went from 0 to $1.32 million that year. So from February to the end of the year, we went from 0 to 1.32. That was in 2015. In 2016, we did just over 2.2. And then this year we'll do, I'd say at least 4. I'm shooting for 5. We're lagging a little bit behind revenue targets, but 4, and profitability way up. So, that's what we're looking at this year.
That's huge. Congrats.
Thanks.
I mean, that's a big number to be able to grow that in a period of 3 years, essentially. That's awesome. So how big is your team right now? And sorry, maybe this is diving too deep, but I'm just curious, how many people are on your team helping you out?
Yeah. So we've got, 8 full-time, including myself.
Okay.
So we've actually downsized the team a little bit, which this is probably a good takeaway for people is, as an entrepreneur, especially in a fast growing business, it just becomes a measurement contest when you're like out of these public things with people,
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, who is the biggest deal here? And so I found myself actually, when people would ask the employee question, I would want that number to be more, because that meant I was more legit. Right. But actually what ended up happening is we skipped the small business phase. We grew so fast that we grew from we hired our first employee, and then within within 9 months or so, we had hired like 10 people or something crazy. And we were just hiring people, like multiple people every single month. And so as a leader and as a manager, I wasn't able to stress test my systems and also like my leadership ability. I was, 22 years old. And so everyone who worked for me pretty much was older than me. I had zero leadership ability whatsoever. I was a decent manager, but it's just like I was just doing a horrible job of leading the company. And then add to the fact that, hey, this is my first rodeo at like 7 figures. So there's just these organizational systems and like things that you kind of need to learn. So it was really inefficient, and our profitability was horrible, especially for the industry that we're in. It was just horrible. And so we've actually downsized the team now. It's the smallest it's ever been since a long time, but we're way more efficient. It's I like to say it's a SEAL team now. We're very effective. We're very efficient. We're still growing rapidly. Our profitability is way up. I'm able to pay people better. I'm able to provide better benefits, like all of these, just create a better work environment, while also, everything's way more efficient. So that's been one of the biggest lessons I learned, is don't get caught in the trap of like growing headcount or chasing what I call the revenue rabbit, right? Like I say these revenue numbers, you're impressed, but we don't talk about my profit numbers, right? Which is actually the most important number. It's the only number that matters. And I was just like, I would try, I got so excited about these revenue numbers that I was just chasing revenue, and then it was all flying out the back door.
Yeah.
Right? These are like the hard lessons that you learn as an entrepreneur. Is like, hey, profit's the only thing that matters. Don't chase headcount. Prioritize results over impressing people. Like all of these things that, just when you're young and kind of chasing stuff, it's easy to lose sight of.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. And so, not to ask about any revenue numbers, I will ask you about profit here. So what roughly are your profits on your book sales that you publish versus the profit coming in from self-publishing school?
Yeah, so everything feeds through self-publishing school. The book sales, that brings in thousands of dollars a month from just the actual books themselves.
Right.
But for me, my philosophy is, hey, passive income is great from books, and you are going to make that, right? Like you're going to do work once and you're going to get paid forever. There's no better ecosystem, like low barrier to entry and probability for success, in my opinion, than this, right? So it's easy to do that. But for me, I'm way more concerned about like, what is the book doing for me and my business? So as a lead generator, like it's insane. As a business generator, like, one of my books that I published brought in like close to $100,000 in the first 55 days just from business on the back end, which is pretty crazy. Like, okay, one of my books, I'll just read you a stat here. I'm in my Infusionsoft. Last month, I gave away an audiobook in one of my books called Book Launch. And in that book last month, there were 1,387 leads from that book.
Wow.
Right. Actually, that's just one opt-in from that book. The other opt-in looks like generated 126 leads.
Awesome.
It's just like the leads in the business is invaluable. And then the profitability on self-publishing school, that's consistently gone up. This year, it'll be more like 30% is what we're looking at. That's what we're modeled out for the year, but it hasn't been that high in the past.
So to kind of restate this, if somebody wants to go out and publish their own book, the chances of them making $5,000 or $10,000 a month, that's feasible. That's
Totally.
A doable number. To bring in a 7-figure a year income from just publishing books, that's probably much more difficult.
Yeah,
however,
that's a full-time gig.
Right. But however, if they're using those books to build leads and generate revenue for whatever their core business, if you will, is, I mean, that's just gravy on top, right? The book sales.
Totally. I like to say book's a silent salesman. It's like when you buy my book and read my book, you're spending hours with me, and the book's not saying a word. I'm not saying a word, but by the end of it, you're ready to do business together, and I've taught you a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, to be honest, this is a lead source I have not personally tapped into like at all. I've published a couple of Kindle books, but it was completely under a pen name that wasn't related to my core business, more just for one of my niche sites to see if I could make some money. And, it still brings in a few $100s a month that I haven't touched in a couple of years. So that's nice.
I mean, that's pretty nice. A lot of people like that kind of success. That's awesome.
Sure. But now I'm thinking like maybe I should be publishing some like real books under my own name to build my own brand and my own audience a little bit better. So having said that, let's dive into what does make a successful book. What's the secret to publishing a great book?
There's obviously there's two pieces, right? There's the book, making the book quality, and there's marketing the book successfully.
Yeah. Let's maybe focus on the promotional strategies, unless you feel like the writing of the book itself is maybe more important, but I could be wrong.
Important. I mean, you can't polish a turd. Right?
Sure.
It's kind of hard to market a crappy book because there's going to be zero virality to it.
Right.
And this is where I think a lot of people go wrong is they just think that they can throw together a book. And I'm just very against that. But the marketing piece, this is what I like. This is what I enjoy. Now, for me, marketing is just positioning. So people get so caught up in their head when they think about marketing, they get so confused. And it's actually just positioning your product, being clear with the hook, clear with who you're serving, and then clear with how your book is going to serve that need, right? The more specific that you can be, the better. This is where I see a lot of people make mistakes, is they aren't specific with the content of their book. They have a topic of a book. It's like, hey, live a better life, pursue your passion, and achieve your dreams. It's like, I hear that, and I don't know if that's books for me. I don't even know really what that book is about.
Right.
But people go that route. So I like to drill into as far down as I can. So I'll give you just a clean cut example. So one of the guys on my staff, he's been with me for a while. He started as a student, and he's about to publish his third book. And it's basically what he uses to plan his life, right? Like it's this weekly check-in and all this, like a planner, right? It's not really a planner. It's a goal-setting tool in a sense. And it's awesome. Like he's one of my most productive, he's a great guy, and he just crushes it. Like he does so well. And he's one of my most productive guys and just really good. So I've seen the results from this planner. Right. But when you tell someone, hey, I have a planner for your life, it's just like, womp, like, cool, another planner. Who cares?
Right.
Like I've seen so many of these. I've bought so many of these that I haven't used. What makes this different? Right. And when I really got to talking to him, it's like, okay, you could have this. He was calling it a life doc, right? Which is great, general positioning. Right. But I drilled in, and what I think is really his strong suit is he's a man of faith, and he's also doing very well in business. And I was like, Omer, that's his name. I said, Omer, this is your niche. Like there's so many guys who they feel like they have to lose their faith, their religion it's like it's an either or decision between religion and business success. And it's like, there's this weird shadow over that. It's like, hey, if you go for business success, you're going to like lose God in the process. Right. Or if you go the other way, it's like, it's an either or decision. And I said, I don't think it's an either or decision, and you're living proof of that. So like, why not say, hey, this is for people who, this is for men who are struggling with their faith and their profession. And it's a tool that they can use to balance that and be more successful and live a more fulfilled life. It's like, oh my gosh.
It's awesome.
How much more specific is that? Like, I know either I'm that or I'm not. Right. And
Yeah.
if I am that, I know this is the book for me. Right. So that's just try to give a real concrete example of you can't niche down too much. And I'm talking to the niche guy here, right? Like,
that's right.
I mean, I'm preaching to the choir at this point. But you really can't. And just being so specific, I could go on and on for days about specific marketing tactics. I mean, we talk ad nauseum about those on the Self-Publishing School blog. But, if you don't get this part right, then any tactic, any tool, any, tweak that you can do, like none of that matters if you don't nail the positioning.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, like you said, I do talk about going specific, going niche, as opposed to going broad when I'm talking about websites, usually is what I'm talking about. But the same principle applies, obviously. If you're talking to the specific person, they understand what they need, what they want, and if they see it, they're going to buy it. So let's say somebody does sort of nail that positioning. They've got the book, and obviously they go through and they make sure it's high quality and everything like that. At that point, they've got the book written. They put it up on Amazon. What are some of what's one or two of the top promotional strategies that you would recommend to make that book move?
Yeah, number one is to do a launch team.
Okay.
So create a launch team with your book, and a launch team is basically just a fancy word for a group of people who support your book launch. This is, there's a couple things that you can do here. So there's obviously what they get and what they give, right? They get a digital copy of the book. They get to see the behind the scenes of a successful book launch, surround themselves with like-minded people. They get access to you. And I like to put people's names in the book who are on the launch team. And then in return, like they read the book ahead of time, they share the book with their friends, and they leave a review on day one when it launches, right? So you have a ton of momentum when you launch the book. I've got a post on this on the Self-Publishing School blog. We can link that up in the show notes. That just goes into detail that I obviously can't go into on this interview, or we'd be here all day.
Sure.
But so that's one thing, and that's a lot of people have found that really helpful. And then let's see. The second thing I'd say is, and this is going to seem like not like a launch tactic, but invest money on a really good cover.
Okay.
And I like to say there's a difference between a good looking cover and a good selling cover, because a good looking cover, it might be appealing to the eye, but it doesn't stand out. It doesn't grab attention. Like the job of your cover is to reach out and smack someone on the butt as they're walking by, right? You want that head jerk reaction. So when I'm looking at my cover, just like, we were talking about before we started recording, I just launched a podcast, the Self-Publishing School podcast.
Yep.
And with that cover, like I had my graphic designer take the top 30 podcasts on iTunes and then drop in our podcast, the potential covers. And then I could step back from my computer screen like 5 to 10 feet. And I could figure out which were the winning ones, because which ones stopped me to look. And that's like really important. But at Google, they call it the BFB test, the big effing button. And basically, right, if you step back from the computer, do you instantly know what you're supposed to do? Like, is it obvious? Like, think about when you land on Google. It's pretty obvious. You type in here and you click this button. So it's a similar thing with your cover. So you need to make it very clear. The title needs to pop off of the page. The title needs to be very clear. It needs to be on the upper third of the cover. A lot of people like to put an image on the top and then the title towards the bottom. That's not smart, because we're talking natural eye path movement here, right? Your eyes naturally go to about a third down. And then they scan down and to the right. So you want to have the title up top, an image potentially in the middle that breaks it up, then the subtitle at the bottom, then your name very big at the very bottom. That's kind of like the formula that I use.
I love it. No, that's good. And like you said, we could probably talk about promotional strategies all day. You've got some great blog posts people can check out on Self-Publishing School. So if people want to learn a little bit more, they can do that, and I'll have links for that as well. Now, sort of talking about your story, you dropped out of school, the business took off. It seems like everything's been smooth sailing. But I do know that there was a little bit of a hiccup along the way. You originally started with a partner, and you no longer are with that partner. So are you willing to share what happened there along the way and what lessons you've learned from that experience?
For sure. Yeah, that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. I heard two different pieces of advice from mentors a really long time ago that they became clear once I got into this situation. Number one was don't ever partner out of insecurity. And that was, it was just a really, it's like, don't partner out of insecurity, like thinking I can't do this by myself, so I need help from someone else. And number two was a little bit more funny. I had a mentor who he said, hey, I like all ships. I like big ships. I like small ships. I like tall ships. I like long ships. But Lord of mercy, don't put me in a partnership. And that was his philosophy on partnerships. Yeah. Now, some people are on both sides of this equation. I'm probably I'm at an extreme end, and I'll probably swing back towards the middle at some point. But basically what happened, I partnered out of insecurity. I had a business partner. We did pretty well for a good little while. Then one day, we were having some success. I showed up to our company retreat, and I found out from one of my employees that my business partner was trying to kick me out of the business. Wow. We went through mediation, and it was basically just, hey, one of us is buying the other person out, and we're bringing in a mediator. So let's work this out. I bought him out. I went multiple six figures in debt for the first time in my life. And it was a huge, huge lesson learned. I know I partnered out of insecurity. I probably won't partner with someone on a business for a really long time. And if I do, the lesson learned there is have a really great operating agreement. Really clear terms. It won't be 50-50 because there's no such thing as a 50-50 partnership. It's never 50-50. Like there's no 50-50 effort, and there's no 50-50 monetarily investment. Like 99% of the time, there's always one person that does more. So you just need to establish that up front. And if the other person's not okay with that, then it's probably not going to be a good partnership, right? Because there was not a clear, like, even though I had the title of quote unquote CEO, it wasn't clear. Like, we would make all decisions together. He would undercut my decisions. Like, it was just a pretty messy process. So I learned a lot of lessons there. And it's been the most growth that I've had is since I bought him out, because I'm the solo guy at the top of the totem pole, right? Like I'm the single captain steering the ship. When we screw up, it's my fault. Yep. When we have success, it's because the team's doing a great job, right? Yep. So it's like, and then you learn so much faster. That way, it's unbelievable. You just fast track your learning. So, and it's been, a year and a couple months. Since that happened, I paid off, all the debt in 11 months. Now the business is extremely profitable, and it's been just the best thing that ever happened to me. And I learned a lot of lessons along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we don't have to go into the details, but at the core, was it just a disagreement between both of you as far as the direction of the company?
I think a little bit. I mean, it was based, I think, and this is just me hypothesizing. So I think it was ultimately, I was the face, and he was kind of the behind the scenes guy. And I think I started getting attention. The business started getting attention, and he got kind of jealous of that. And so then it was just like and gotcha. He was my boss at Student Painters previously. So it's like, oh, the student becomes the CEO and then also gets all the attention. And then it's like, that's a hard pill to swallow for anyone.
It's a tough position to be in, for sure. Yeah.
And even though it's like, hey, I know I work 5 times harder than you, and it's like, I'm driving this business, and I'm willing to do stuff that you're not. I think that's hard for someone to look in the mirror and say that, like, hey, look, I'm just not, like, this guy put in all the money to start the business and he's working way harder than me. Hey, I'm fine with taking the back seat. Like, I think that's just like human nature, right? So I think that bulled up, and I think that's ultimately what kind of did it in. As well as I was not this is a phase of my life where I hadn't learned a lot of things. So I was pretty abrasive, and just pretty brash. Right. I was after it. So I was not an easy person to work with, for sure.
Yeah. And so, lesson learned about partnerships. They can be good or bad, but I will just echo that. If anybody's thinking about going into a partnership, just think long and hard about it. Think through all the scenarios and the pros and cons of that partnership. So I'm going to just ask one or two more questions here. I do want to ask a little bit more about why self-publishing school has been such a huge success. What are the biggest drivers there?
The biggest driver is learning marketing. And I kind of had this epiphany when I dropped out of school. My business was completely failing. And I talked to a couple mentors like, hey, what's going on here? And the advice that I got from a lot of them was, hey, you need to learn marketing and you need to learn specifically copywriting. So not copywriting like copyright a book, but copywriting, which means salesmanship in print. So writing words that sell. Right. And so that was the feedback that I got is, hey, learn copywriting, learn marketing. And so once I started learning that, I'll just back up a second. I had this epiphany that was, if I learn this skill, I will never be broke. I will never be out of a job and I can write my own paycheck, because people always need more leads and more customers. Like that's something that will never go away. So, if I learn that skill, that's going to grow my business. And so that's exactly what happened. I doubled down, for copywriting. I was handwriting copy for 1 hour a day for 3 months. I was reading every marketing book, every copywriting book. I mean, I just poured myself into that. And because of that, we were able to acquire a lot of customers early on. And we had this fast revenue growth, which I'm a firm believer that to grow a business, you need an economic engine, which means you need customers. And until you get those customers, nothing else matters. Your logo doesn't matter. If you're an LLC or not, it doesn't matter. Your website doesn't matter. Like nothing matters but getting customers and getting money coming in the door, because that money will solve a lot of problems. And you can basically pay people to do all the stuff that you don't want to do and you don't like to do and you're not good at it.
Now,
right?
Yep. Now, you said that you acquired customers. Where were you getting these leads from?
Yes, the very first launch, we held a series of 3 webinars. The leads were coming from multiple sources. Number one is just hustling as hard as we could. And I found this bot that messaged all of my Facebook friends and said, hey, I'm doing this webinar on how to write a book. Can you share this with someone who might find it helpful? So people started sharing it and sharing it and sharing it. Like I only had one call to action. That's, I want you to share to this. And then we also had a couple affiliates that took a chance on me because I done a really good job of investing in relationships and not just asking them for stuff, but giving them stuff and just being a good friend. And I just said, hey, we're launching this. Would you mind helping me out? And they did. So that's how we got the leads. We did a series of webinars 3 weeks in a row. On that webinar, we sent them to an application. The psychology behind that is if you apply to be a part of this, as opposed to me pitching you, now you're trying to sell me. I'm not trying to sell you. You're trying to sell me on why you're a good fit for this hand-selected, small, exclusive program.
Right.
And so that's what we did. We were very transparent with people. We said, hey, I've done this successfully myself, but I've never taught this successfully. So I'm doing it. It'll be the most intimate environment that it's ever been. It's going to be with a handful of people. And no one will ever have this kind of access to me. Like I'm literally going to give you my personal cell phone number. Call me or text me anytime. And so we sold it before we had even created it.
That's awesome.
We sold 44 folks into this first class. And it brought in, 80 something thousand dollars, like 86,000 or something. And then I built it alongside of them over 12 weeks. And I was literally, they would tell me exactly what they wanted to learn. And then I would roll those modules out. And then, we had a ridiculous success rate. And then that's how we kind of got the ball rolling. But to circle all the way back to your original question, why has my business been successful? It's because that skill and the ability to market and drive revenue, and then recognize that there's certain things that you're not going to be good at, and just hire out those things.
Yeah, no, that's good. Good advice. And it sounds like just a lot of hustle in between, taking care of obviously the sales copy, but then reaching out in a number of different ways to bring in those leads.
You said hustle, and I just wanted to not gloss over a couple things.
Sure.
Which one was, we literally, we would close people on the phones, and then we closed the cart. And then we did, why didn't you buy phone calls? which is like, hey, we want to hear why you didn't buy. Like, book this call for 15 minutes. And we did all of these calls. And on those calls, we sold a ton of more people into the program. And then we also found out how we needed to change our marketing and our messaging moving forward. Then we had a low tier and a high tier. At 30 days in, we said, hey, try this sample coaching call. Because you didn't buy the bigger package. Try this out. See if you like it. If not, you get a free coaching call. If so, like, we're going to tell you about an opportunity to upgrade. So to all these phone sales with those folks. A bunch of those people upgraded. A bunch of which are like now my best employees. They're people who went through the program, right? And so it's like every step of the way, doing things that other people aren't willing to do. Like, who's going to get on a bot and message every single one of their Facebook friends and then like follow up, right? Who's going to get on the phone and when everyone's trying to just automate everything, like, who's going to get on the phone and actually try to close someone? Who's going to, say, hey, why didn't you buy? Who's going to, it's like all of those little things, those high touch point things that no one's willing to do, but that actually move the needle.
Big time. No, great tips, great advice. I love your story. You've had a lot of success, so I appreciate you coming on here and sharing it. This final question that I have is maybe just one for me, because I'm thinking a lot more about it lately because, well, I'm becoming an old man, as we know, and, with my kids. But, the question surrounds, if you didn't have to worry about money for the rest of your life, I start thinking about this. What would I do with my time? So I pose that to you. If you didn't have to worry about money anymore and had to be out hustling and doing all the great things you are, how would you spend your time?
My gut reaction is I'd be doing exactly this sort of thing. I feel like my purpose and my mission in life is to scale massive companies. It's like I feel like my greatest skill, and then also the area where I can add the most value and create the most wealth, which ultimately I see my life being basically two phases. It's kind of like John D. Rockefeller, who's my hero. And just, I make a ton of money, and then spend the second part of my life giving it all away, So like philanthropy, creating charities, foundations, like all that stuff. So that might be my answer. But it's just like, I feel like you have to have money to do that stuff, or I don't even feel like it's just a fact. Like, you have to have money to be able to do that and to be able to create the kind of change that I want to create. And so this is kind of like the economic engine for me. And I have fun with it. Right. So, this is phase one. And then phase two is, really ramping up the philanthropy side of things.
I love it. Well, that's awesome. So Chandler, how can people stay in touch with you or follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, so the best place to go is the Self-Publishing School blog. One of my favorite posts that we have that people seem to find helpful is how to self-publish a book. That's helpful. People love that. And then I've got some free training. It's a webinar. You can go to self-publishingschool.com/free. And it's like, if you're interested more in like, okay, I want to learn about the writing piece. We didn't really talk about that much. Then the marketing, then the launching, then like how to leverage it for your business. I talk about that. That's like the two most helpful resources that people like. And then I'm just hanging out on Facebook every now and then.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, Chandler. I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Spencer.
Yep. We'll see you.